presentations. I'd like to introduce our first presenter, Jo Perrott. Jo is the Safe at the Top coordinator in the sunny region of Nelson, Tasman, at the top of the South Island in New Zealand. And Jo's presentation is entitled Former Refugee Population in Nelson Bays. All yours, Jo.
Thank you. So I am Jo Perrott from the Nelson Bays Family House Organisation, and I am the Safe at the Top coordinator for the Nelson Tasman region. My presentation today is on former refugee population in Nelson Bays. And so first, just looking at the difference between refugees and migrants. Refugees do not choose to leave their homeland. They're fleeing in a crisis. They're often bringing very few possessions with them, little documentation when they're arriving in their country. They're often leaving their family members behind. So the whole process is very traumatic and stressful. However, the migrants will often choose to come to the country. They're coming with their possessions, financial security, passports, and often with their families as well. So quite a different scenario. How refugees enter New Zealand, there are three main ways this can happen. First one is via the government refugee quota allocation. So these refugees are funded and have wraparound services with them. And so in New Zealand, we reserve the quota placements for the neediest cases, such as medically complex, disabled, women at risk, and protection cases. This is quite a unique stance for the international community. The second is through the refugee family sponsorship or family reunion members. So this has been the original family has come through the quota allocation, but now they're wishing to sponsor their own extended family members to come to New Zealand, and so the refugee family themselves sponsor those extended family members. And then the third way is through the asylum seekers criteria, and in Nelson we have a small group of people from Afghanistan who've come through this system. Refugee population is currently just over 1,000 people in Nelson. This is going to be increasing due to local demand and obviously the international demands now on countries to be taking on more refugees. In Nelson, we're taking about 10 to 12% of the overall New Zealand quota numbers, and this has increased due to the quota of Christchurch settlement centre after the earthquakes. So we did increase our numbers then. The first refugees that settled in New Zealand or Nelson were predominantly from Vietnam and Cambodia. Since then, from Burma, we've got Burmese, Chin, Kayan, and Zuni, and now Nepali-speaking Vietnamese. Through the family reunification members, they pose the greatest risk to our region at the moment, and that's because, as I mentioned before, the families themselves bring in the extended families to Nelson, and so it's very difficult. There is no organisation in place because they're not funded, so it's very difficult for organisations to know the exact numbers of the intakes. There's no health assessment prior to them coming, so in terms of the community it's very difficult to know what conditions are in the community, and so it does create a few risks for the region. And whereas with the refugees who have come through the quota system, there's a 6-week orientation program. Come in and all health assessments are done, numbers, quotas and things like that are taken in, so we have a bit more of an accurate picture. But for families who have come through the reunification system, it's very difficult to keep track of. Some of the issues that have been highlighted in Auckland through the orientation program is also still quite similar to some of the issues that we've noticed here in Nelson, and that is that the refugees have quite major and complex issues, mental health, physical health issues, and the refugees status is not recognised in any data collection. So when they are filling in forms, they're ticking the other box, which can be a number of ethnicities. So once again, data collection, accurate numbers is quite difficult to obtain at the moment. Also, there's very limited resources due to the very complex needs that these families are coming to New Zealand with, and it's, the refugees are quite illiterate in their own language, so it's not simply a case of translating a local brochure into their own language, because if they're illiterate in their own language, then we're trying to produce brochures with bullet points and pictures and trying to find ways of getting health information out to refugees that they actually do understand. They also have very little knowledge, if any, of electrical appliances, services. So when field workers are trying to set up homes and for the refugees when they first come into Nelson, there's also an education around how to use a lot of the appliances. Services and programs are just not really set up for refugee needs at the moment, so there's been a lot of work around with health professionals ensuring that there's the knowledge there. It takes a lot longer, ensuring that there's interpreters available, and using the interpreting services has also been quite challenging in Nelson, and so we're trying to ensure that we've got best practice in place and using qualified interpreters. The legal obligations, obviously, refugees, when they come into New Zealand, they have the same right as everyone else in the country, so they have the right to effective communication, they have the right to be fully informed, and to make informed choice and give informed consent. And this is so to ensure that once again, for effective communication to take place, there needs to be the interpreters in place, and it can be quite difficult at times to ensure that the person is signing any forms that they do have, that informed choice, and they know what they're signing. So that's where the communication becomes really, really important to ensure that they know exactly and the understanding is there. What's SAC at the top doing? So we have a coalition group, and we have now invited the Red Cross to be part of a coalition group member, and this is because the Red Cross is the local agency who has the refugee resettlement program. So they're funded for quota families coming into the country, and have got that program in place, which is wonderful supporting workers. SAC has also developed a health information resource, an A to Z of health conditions and health information brochures, and we have now translated this into Burmese, Ching and Nepali languages. Trying to connect all general practices to qualified interpreters and refugee services. So once again, this is so we're not relying on family members, which is what has happened in the past, and obviously is not always ideal, so we're trying to ensure that we have qualified interpreters. And obviously ongoing understanding and advocating for refugee needs. We have also developed a water safety brochure. This was due to, unfortunately, back in December 2014, a local Chingman drowned while out fishing, so it really highlighted the need that we need to ensure that we have some kind of a water safety brochure that just has some relevant information on it around fishing, boating and swimming around the Nelson region. And this was also to support Red Cross when they were running some basic water confidence and survival skill programs as well. This is a copy of the water safety brochure that we developed, just showing how we try to keep it quite simple bullet points, pictures, local signs that would be seen around the beaches and rivers, and also to highlight the fact that it can be quite difficult for these families when they come into New Zealand, picking up a brochure that's all in English and they have no idea what it says. So just trying to make things simple as we possibly can. We've also, we've also, as I said, the resource folders at A to Z. Each folder has an English version and then showing the Maison Nepali to follow it as well, and then that has gone out to all general practices, so that's GPs, refugee field workers, to also then try and follow up some of those key messages that the person may have heard or got from the general practice. We're also ensuring that the general practices are being hooked into the language line or interpreting New Zealand, so we're not relying on those family members, because obviously medical information, it can be quite difficult to explain, so we're trying to use best practice as much as possible. Also promoting the use of the interpreters through other agencies, Strength and Families, Family Violence, ACC, Youth and Income, those sorts of places, to ensure that we're all using the same system. Also, back in 2008, we launched Speak Out Nelson Tasman, which is a form of reporting racist incidences, and they can go onto the 0508 number or the website, and if they've reported or seen or witnessed any racist attacks or incidences, then this can go through to the police, just to ensure that everyone feels safe and secure in the Nelson Bays community. And at the end here are just some of my details and email address if anyone has any questions or anything. That's my presentation for today.
Well, thanks, Jo, for your interesting presentation. Lots of interesting things in that. We've got a few minutes for questions. Does anybody have any questions?
I can't see any online questions or any hands up at the moment, Tracy.
No. Okay. Okay, well, you can always take a note of Jo's email address and contact her with any questions you have or anything you think of after the presentation. So now I'd like to introduce our second speaker for today, Melinda Spiteri, who is the Manager Road User Behaviour from the Royal Automobile Club of Victoria in Australia. Melinda's presentation is entitled Using Child Restraints Video Series, Reaching Culturally and Linguistically Diverse Communities. We'll look at Nino's Child Restraint Challenge, which has been translated into 6 languages.
Okay, good morning everyone. So as mentioned, I'm here to present on a child restraint video series that we developed and then subsequently translated into different languages. But before I start, for those of you that aren't familiar with RACV, I'll just give a brief introduction about who we are. So we are a membership organisation in Victoria, and we have a wide range of benefits and services. One of our products is emergency roadside assistance, and we also have insurance, as well as having a number of clubs and resorts across the state of Victoria as well as in some other states. I work in the public policy department at RACV, and I manage the road user behaviour team. So the role of the public policy department is to develop RACV policy on issues related to motoring and mobility. We also advocate on behalf of our members, and we provide information and advice to our members on a variety of topics. So one of the key areas for my team is child restraints. So we have a range of child restraint resources, and as you can see on the screen on the right are a couple of our fact sheets that we have produced. So the green fact sheet is on using restraints and some tips for parents and carers on how to use them correctly every time. The blue fact sheet is on child restraints and airbags, and that was after some research that we did around the safety implications that there may be around putting a child restraint next to an airbag. So from that we developed a fact sheet to help parents and reassure them that they can use their child restraint safely with an airbag fitted in the vehicle. On the left of the screen is a screenshot of the website Child Car Seats, which has the results of the Child Restraint Evaluation Program, which is a program that we partner in where we crash test child restraints and then give them a star rating on how they perform. So all of these resources we do partner with other organisations, and often they're Victorian organisations such as Vic Roads, which is the state road authority, Kids Safe Victoria, which is a non-for-profit foundation aimed at reducing unintentional injuries to children, and also the Transport Accident Commission, or TAC. This is a Victorian government-owned organisation, and their role is to promote road safety, improve trauma systems, and also support those who have been injured on the roads. And they were a partner in this current project. So just to cover a little bit around child restraint use and misuse in Australia. So what we do know from research is that child restraint use in Australia is quite high, with around 90% of parents using some sort of child restraint for their child. This is quite good, and it's probably partly a contributor to that is that we've got legislation in Victoria that came in place in 2009 that requires all children up to the age of 7 to be in a child restraint. But it's not all good news, because we do know that a large proportion of child restraints aren't installed correctly. About 70% from various studies shows that child restraints aren't correctly installed. Some of the errors that we see are things like twisted and loose straps, or the tether strap of the restraint not being correctly attached, the seatbelt path not being threaded through the right path on the child restraint, or it could be the wrong restraint type for the child. So it could be a restraint that's too big for the child and not correct for their size. So we know that's the issue with the broader population. We also wanted to find out if there were any specific concerns for called groups. A few years ago there were some concerns that called communities might have a poorer understanding of road safety, and specifically child restraint laws. So in 2010, together with the TAC, we conducted a survey on broader road safety issues for new migrants to see what their understanding and their behaviour was around road safety. And from this we found that 26% never used a restraint for a child under 7. At the same time, we were also getting many requests from different called groups for information on child restraints in other languages, which we didn't have at the time. And from this we saw that there was a clear need for new arrivals to have information on child restraints in their own language. So this led us to the current project, which was to develop a video series on using child restraints that could subsequently be available in other languages. And we chose to develop a video over written material, as it was identified that written materials may not always be appropriate for specific called groups. So the main aims of this video series were to communicate the importance of using the right restraint and using the restraint correctly. So specifically the objectives were to help parents or carers use restraints correctly, identify and fix common mistakes that occur with child restraints, and show how to make regular checks. We wanted the videos to feel genuine and to show real parents demonstrating what they do when they're preparing for their children to travel in a car. We also wanted the videos to be credible. So for this we used Nino, who is RACV's Training and Development Coordinator, and he's been fitting child restraint for many years with RACV, and now also trains the RACV Child Restraint Fitters Network. We wanted the messages in the videos to be simple and come across in a friendly and approachable manner. We developed 3 videos as part of the series, one each on rearward-facing restraints, forward-facing restraints, and booster seats. And in each video there were 2 different children were shown with the restraint. Parents place their child in the restraint and use their normal routine and what they check when they fit their child into the restraint, and describe what they're doing. Once they've buckled their child in, that Nino enters the scene and checks the restraints being used correctly. Sometimes the parent would ask Nino a question or 2, and he answers the question and thoroughly checks the restraint, just to show how quickly and easily checks can be done. And to keep the videos a bit more lighthearted, Nino then gives each parent a score out of 10 to show how well they've done fitting their child in the restraint. So the key messages that we highlighted in the video were that the shoulders needed to be within the shoulder height marker range, that the top tether needed to be anchored to the correct point and pulled tight, that the seatbelt needed to be routed through the correct path and there shouldn't be any slack in the seatbelt, that there should be no more than a 2-finger gap between the child and the inbuilt harness, at the harness and the headrest needs to be adjusted as the child grows, and importantly that the child should not be out of the restraint while they currently fit it into it. So in November 2013, we launched the English videos. We did have a media launch and invited stakeholders to that event, and we got quite good coverage on the news at that time. We also featured the videos as the main story in RACV's electronic newsletter, which goes out to our membership. This generated about 5,000 clicks to the videos, and since the launch there have been over 7,500 views on YouTube of the videos. I'll just show you now a quick highlights video of the series so you get a better understanding of the sentence style of them. It is in English.
The safest restraint or booster seat for your kids can be trickier than you think. We've asked parents to video themselves as they attempt to get it right. We just need to do it with strap and glove. Almost ready to go. How'd you go? Pretty good, I think. Can you have a look? Take that adjustment so there's no slipping that in the tether strap. Both my fingers between the harness and the child. So that's really good. Good, Mummy. Okay, make sure you do a good job. You have to get a good score. Okay. Wait. Muffling you nice and tight. And what are you going to demonstrate to me today? How to put our child safely into our car. Shall I get a look for you? Let's. Hey, Sarah. It's actually got shoulder height adjustment, so she falls in that race. Yep, similar to that with the seat belt. Tight across his hips. Hey, mate, what do you think? Is that nice and tight? Yeah, that looks great. Excellent. You can see it. Shoulder height adjustment indicator, which is spot on. And importantly, the seatbelt training through the seatbelt guide. These parents have done pretty well, and most importantly, they've kept their kids safe.
Okay, hopefully to see and hear that video okay. So just moving on to the development of developing the videos into other languages. So this was the second phase of the project, and we wanted to target newly arrived migrants. These were identified as having the greatest need in child restraint information in other languages. So to work out which languages we wanted to target, we looked at population information, Victorian migration trends, and we also spoke to Early Learning Association Australia, who work closely with core communities to deliver child restraint information. So from this consultation, the final languages that we chose were Arabic, Cambodian, Dari, Karen, Persian and Somali. We then developed a simplified version of the script to describe what was happening in the videos rather than translating the script word for word. The script was then professionally translated and checked by a different translator, and a third person then recorded the script to help ensure accuracy. As a final informal check, 2 languages were listened to by RACV staff who spoke those languages to make sure that the correct messages were being conveyed in the videos. And each of the translated videos still has English subtitles. The translated videos were launched in June last year, and we had a media release that went out about the videos, and we also directly engaged with 1,800 groups through email, which these groups were those that we'd previously worked with in a program that we used to have on a new migrant driving program, as well as childcare centres, family daycares and schools and other relevant stakeholders. To date, the rearward facing videos have been viewed the most, 730 times, followed by boosters and then forward facing restraints. The most popular languages have been Arabic and Persian, Arabic video being viewed 609 times. We also developed DVDs because we found that some groups didn't have access to the online resources, and we've distributed around 400 DVDs. It might not seem like big numbers, but I just wanted to highlight that they're not big groups that we're talking about. So for example, the Karen community, there has been just under 4,000 migrants settled in Australia in the last 5 years. So a much smaller proportion of this would have children or are children aged 0 to 7, and then a smaller amount are in Victoria. So we're not talking about big numbers, but we're dealing with small groups that have the need for this information in a way that they can understand. So since we've launched, we've continued to promote the resources in other languages. in a variety of ways. One of the ways that we have promoted them is through advertising in called newspapers, and we've also developed some flyers that we can hand out at relevant events around the resources, and Early Learning Association Australia have helped continue to distribute the DVDs, and they also now have some written material available in other languages on child restraints. So that brings me to the end of my presentation with my contact details there, and also where you can find the videos. So I'll just hand over back now. If you've got any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Thank you, Melinda. That was a really informative presentation, and really illustrated the importance of trying to, I guess, customise things for our migrant populations to get them on board with the safety initiatives and whatever else. We have time for some quick questions. Does anybody have anything they'd like to ask Melinda?
Doesn't look like there's any questions, but I had one, which was around, so you actually recorded the voiceover. Have you thought about doing the entire video with someone from that culture?
We didn't initially. I guess initially we wanted the videos also to be available in English because there wasn't video resources, so we wanted to have an English version of it. It's a great idea. I think it might be quite challenging to source the right people to be in the video, but yeah, it's a good idea.
Yeah, I guess some of the things that we've done, it I guess connects with them better when they see people of their own culture delivering the message as well. So, but I think it's great that what's being done. And I do have another question from Stan Salagaris, who's asking what the feedback you've received from the called groups.
From the call groups, or from the organisers of the call groups, we've had positive feedback. So initially when we launched the series, we only had it available online, and we did get a lot of feedback that it would be much better placed to have it on DVD. So we haven't had specific feedback other than that it's great, there's a need for it, and requesting more copies of the DVD, which have been distributed widely, and that people are valuing it as a resource.
Okay, thank you, Melinda. And if anybody else has any other questions for Melinda, you can always contact her on her email address you can see on the screen there. So our last presenter for today is Peter Horton, Director of LOTE Marketing in Australia. And Peter's going to talk about emerging multicultural communities, why and how. He's going to tell us about newly emerging communities, their needs in regards to accessing settlement information, along with the reasons and what organisations should be looking for when they incorporate multicultural communication in their overall communication campaigns.
Thank you, Tracy. Good afternoon, everyone. I think we're into the afternoon now. I'd certainly like to commend Melinda and Joanna for the content of their two presentations, and they've covered a lot of the main reasons as to why, when we're talking about minority groups, that they should be looked at in terms of one's overall communication strategies. My apologies to anyone listening in from New Zealand, but one in 4 people in Australia at the moment were born overseas, and that number increases when we have families who speak a language other than English in the home. But what I want to touch on is the very fact that it is so important that if you are going to include cold communities in your communication mix, that you fully understand the communities that you're going to target. I can quickly go to the top listing of cold communities in Australia, but that won't necessarily mean that if a client is targeting a number of cold communities, that listing will be the main communities that you're the ones that you really need to target. If you look at population figures based on the totem pole, then you'll have communities in there that really don't have the need to get your information. So you've got to really identify the target groups that you're going for in line with your product and or service that you're going to be promoting. if you remember what Melinda was saying about how they selected the communities to be targeted for the RACV campaign, that's a clear indication that you've got to go just beyond looking at total audience numbers. You've got to look at the communities that really have the need for your information to be targeted to them. So if we've overcome that reason and we've addressed the need to target minority groups, then we need to be saying, well, okay, if we're going to target these particular groups, what is the best way of getting to them? Many years ago, when Loaf Marketing first started, we were looking at ethnic newspapers, we were looking at multilingual radio stations, and on some occasions there were some TV stations that presented some programs in languages other than English. But if you look at today's communication channels, where we've got web, where we've got the social media, where we've got YouTube, it opens up a whole range of different communication streams that that we now need to incorporate into overall communication strategies. But in saying that, as was indicated before, some of the newly emerging communities don't have access to online facilities. And it's also important to note too that if you are producing information in the printed format only, you've got to take into account that some of the people that have arrived here in Australia have literacy problems. And that literacy problem doesn't simply relate to the fact that they can't read English. In some cases, in some communities, people are having problems reading their own language. So spending a great deal of money translating information into brochures and fact sheets, etc., you need to think whether these people are able to read it, because if they can't read it, then the rubbish bin becomes the first port of call because they are not able to understand your material. So we've got to have a look at the communication channels. We've also got people in some of the ethnic communities, the older ones, who have vision problems. So providing them with a lot of printed information is not necessarily going to be effective to get your message across. So looking at the communication channels, now, yes, we have information on web, we can produce videos, but also just simply putting your information up onto a website, you should also be considering whether in fact you can match that printed material with audio, because it's much easier for people who can't read their own language to be able to listen to it and certainly overcome any issues with vision problems that some of the older people in some of the ethnic communities may have. If we have agreed then that we're going to include the targeting of cold communities, whether you call them minority groups or ethnic communities or people from a non-English speaking background, the first thing that you've got to remember is that it is going to be an exercise that is going to take some money out of your advertising communication budget. There is a cost factor involved. So once we've decided on, yes, we're going to translate this information, then we've got to have the information professionally translated, and engaging professional translators, there is a cost factor involved there. It may well be that the information incorporates a Czech translation, as is indicated before by Melinda, that they have their people check out the translations by other translators. Again, if you're engaging a Czech translator, there's another cost. And it may well be before you put that material out into the marketplace, whether it is a website information, whether it's a DVD, a video, or it is an easy-to-read, simplistic brochure with lots of visual as opposed to lots of text, you may want to get that focus tested. And you can take that out into the community, get a number of the people from each of the communities together to have a read of it, a listen to it, and make sure that it is culturally sensitive and that it in fact covers all of the information that you want to get out into the marketplace, and importantly in that translation process that the integrity and meaning of your English text has not changed during that translation process. An example, the one project that we worked on for the SES was they wanted to do a recruitment program, and their recruitment program in English was "You'll look good in orange," because that's the colour of the uniforms that they wear. When we first were approached to undertake the work, we went out and spoke to a number of people and asked them to come back to us and say, well, does this have any meaning? Does it mean anything in your language if you translate "you'll look good in orange"? And the response was, no problems in translating the words, "you'll look good in orange," but in our community, it doesn't mean anything. So it was a case of speaking to the client and saying, look, that particular line won't mean anything, we will have to change that. And it was just purely a case of just making some changes to the wording. The content of the material was fine because it explained that what they were trying to do was to recruit people from a non-English speaking background to become members of the SES. So we just changed it to a recruitment exercise that was able to get the message across. So it's not just a case of handing a translation company or a multicultural company like Loke Marketing the material. What we want to do is to make sure that when you get that information back in whatever language or languages that you've had it produced in, that it is going to effectively reach the people that you want it to reach and that they will fully understand the messages that you want to get across. I have to say from personal experience going out doing focus testing, when we did some focus testing for SIDS and kids on how to sleep your baby, some of the feedback we got from the communities was quite staggering, that their lack of understanding of the Australian way, the Anglo-Saxon way of putting your baby to bed. We had some feedback from the material that we presented to them that really meant that the client had to think a little bit more, if you like, deeply in terms of the style of content, and instead of putting a lot of content, we used pictures with ticks and crosses to make sure that the people who were going to read that material got a very quick overview of what was right and what was wrong. So again, I just want to point out that what you've got to do is, if you're engaging a company to translate your information, obviously what you're going to do is get a quote, and that will cover A, the number of languages that you want, but you've got to be very, very sure in your own mind that when you get a quote back, that it is responding directly to what you want. It's no good suddenly getting some work done, and at the end of that work you get an invoice from the client and it is far more expensive than what you had gathered. What you need to know from the first up is, this is what I want. These are the target groups that I'm going for, because the target groups are in line with my product and or service. So if I'm targeting the elderly groups for information on aged care services, then I know that the selection of cold communities is in line with my product and or service. And when I have decided and agreed upon that those communities are the ones that I want to target, you've determined what is the most appropriate way for that information to get out to those communities. Is it a press campaign? Is it a radio campaign? Is it a DVD, a video, etc., etc.? Make sure that when you're getting the quote for the work that you want to be undertaken, that that quote covers all of those particular needs and services, so that you're getting your product, you know exactly what you're going to be paying for, and that at the end of the day, it is a product that is going to effectively reach your target audience. It is certainly an area that one could say, minority groups, if you collectively put all of the ethnic communities together in Australia, it is not minority. Collectively, it is a majority. If we've got something like 30% of Australia's population that are from a non-English speaking background, and again, I apologise to our New Zealand people, I'm not quite sure of your situation, but certainly you've got to really consider that these people need to get your information. They have a need, and it's only when you identify the very fact that those people need to find out about safety information, health, legal information, whatever it may be, then if you're doing it, then I think you can all feel satisfied that you are getting your information out to people from a non-English speaking background in a professional way, that these people will get the information that's going to help their lifestyle and help them settle into Australia, their new country. I'll leave it to you now if you've got any questions, happy to answer those. In the meantime, I'll hand you back to Tracy.
Well, thank you, Peter, for sharing all that. You've certainly given us plenty of practical issues to think about. Does anybody have any questions for Peter?
Doesn't look like it, no.
Okay, well, you can always contact Peter or any of the other presenters today at their email addresses if you want to after this webinar. So on behalf of all the participants, I would like to thank all our presenters today for taking the time to share with us. There's certainly been a lot of interesting things shared today for us to take away and think about. And also I'd just like to remind all participants, if you could please fill out the survey on this webinar and let us know any topics you'd like for these webinars to address. We're currently planning the webinars for next year and would welcome all feedback on that. Our next webinar, which we're hoping to fit in before the end of the year, will be an update on the Australasian Injury Prevention and Safety Conference, which is being held in Sydney later this month. We're still working on a date for this and we'll let you know as soon as we have a date sorted out. Lastly, I'd just like to remind everybody that the recorded webinar link will be sent by email to all participants and it will be available on the Australian Safe Communities and the Safe Communities Foundation New Zealand websites probably about the middle of next week. And we'd invite you to share these webinar links with your colleagues. So thank you everyone for your time today.